back to the second part of this fantastic interview with Evan Shapiro. We talked about personal reinvention. We talked about the future of content. We talked about the situation of the leadership, the global leadership. Now back to talking about what is going on now on advertising, content, and many more. Back to the content arena. You are in US, you are a bit ahead of us. We have a strong public and linear television. Because we have an older target, an older audience, like sitting on the couch. We said once, the dad kind of audience. I'm joking. So we have a strong linear and public television. The creator economy is big, but not so big like yours. Anyway, we are living in a weird moment or weird situation. So streaming is growing up, is breaking all the record of revenues, see Netflix, but they produce less content. We have more containers than content. Independent producers struggle to finance their stuff. What's your thought about what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different reasons behind all of this. Most notably, the big tech platforms, Netflix, Amazon, and the like, are cutting back on the amount of entertainment content they're producing globally. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. One, it's really hard to produce content in every region. It's just very difficult. And so rather than greenlighting wholly owned shows like they would have 5 years ago or 6 years ago, Netflix is now, really looking harder at co-productions. And so rather than Netflix producing something and, the local broadcaster producing something, Netflix is investing in the local broadcaster's production. So that's half as many productions right there. And they're taking, the vast majority of those resources. They're not cutting back necessarily on content spend, although maybe they are, because again, the competition for them was a little different than it used to be. It's now much more about YouTube than it is about, let's say, Amazon or Apple. But they're also putting a lot of those resources, a lot of that money into sports. And so, first the NFL, and then, FIFA, and wrestling, and they're not the only one. Amazon is invested in the NFL and in basketball. And you're going to see that translated around the rest of the world. And then you look at the deals that Netflix made with TF1 and Amazon made with France Television in France, and you're seeing a major shift. The big tech platforms are basically admitting, hey, there's no way we can get to the level of daily scale from a content standpoint as these traditional television networks has. So we're going to basically swallow them into our ecosystem. Conversely, you're seeing a public broadcaster and you're seeing these major broadcasters in France say, all right, well, we can't get to these younger audiences on our own platform, and we can't scale our ability to generate revenue as fast as big tech. So we're going to partner with them. Those two experiments are going to become the norm. You're going to see more and more of those types of cross discipline collaborations really take hold. And so what that means is these funders of the explosion of content, Netflix, Amazon in particular, and Disney will be a part of this as well over the last half decade or a decade or so. They're pulling back and they're figuring out new ways to get to the amount of content they need that doesn't involve making as much as they used to. Simultaneously, YouTube has emerged as the biggest television channel on the face of the earth, bigger than Netflix, bigger than Amazon, not bigger than the local broadcaster usually for all people, but bigger than the local broadcaster always for people under the age of 40. And so the creator economy, the Jake Pauls of the world, the Mr. Beasts, the Blueys of the world, these talents are now going to be, and these pieces of intellectual property are now seen, especially for millennials, Gen Z, and Gen A, as equal to or greater than traditional premium content. And so for the producers out there, for the creators of traditional media, you don't have to give up on the art that you like You just have to take your art that you like and find the audience for it yourself. You can no longer rely on the gatekeepers and the commissioners and the platforms to help you find your audience and for the basic economics of survival. They can be part of your mix, but they should not be the entirety of your mix. I'm interviewing World of Wonder on our podcast next week. World of Wonder produces RuPaul's Drag Race, and they produce iterations of it in 18 countries across the planet. They have their own relationship with their own audience, and they've been doing that for 20 plus years. They have their own direct-to-consumer paid platform called World of Wonder Plus, and they manage that. It's a white label tech product from Vimeo. They are a classic, great example of how producers can adapt from what they've done to what they should do. And what's fascinating about them is they've been doing it for 20 years. This is not new. Their ability to speak directly to their audience makes them less reliant on the gatekeepers. And importantly, when the gatekeepers do knock on their door, they command better fees because they have an audience that they know they can deliver.
When we were talking on LinkedIn recently about short content dramas, I know you have a sharp opinion on this, but I read somewhere that short dramas can be a low-budget solution for producers to get along to this difficult market. Maybe not in the same crappy format of this Don't You Win. Maybe a different way can be useful to this creator economy emerging, producing way. What do you think about this matter?
I think there's a lot to unpack in this microdrama movement. First and foremost, the biggest players in this space, they're not creating content in the same way that those of us who grew up in television or film think of content. These are games. These are not television shows. They're Candy Crush, where you basically get someone addicted to something and then they have to pay to keep playing it. That's what they are. They're also paying illegally low fees for actors and directors and the creative team and the production team on these shows. And then you're spending billions of dollars on marketing to get the app downloads. So when you think about that format and that business model, it's not content in the way that we think it is. It's gaming. It's not good content. It's made specifically to be bad. It's priced illegally low to sustain the people who are making it. And it's based entirely on a cost for acquisition model of install of apps that no traditional producer or publishing platform would ever enter. They just don't spend that kind of money. I think people fail to understand how much TikTok spent, $40-50 billion to become TikTok in marketing. Just in marketing. That's not the platform. That's not the algorithm. That's just customer acquisition. So like if you're really great at customer acquisition and you can keep your cost per acquired consumer low, great. That's a great thing. But that's not the content business. That's the gaming business. That's the app business. That's something completely different. Now, do I think short form, small chaptered, vertical content is a great idea? Absolutely. I love TikTok. I think TikTok is an amazing platform, problematic ownership aside. And so I do think there's a format of what I call pocket television where you can adapt documentaries and game shows and comedies. There's a great short comedy that's funded by a brand right now called Roomies, which is doing quite well. And I do think that has a bright future in the marketplace. I think if you want to start an app and you're going to build everything entirely around getting people to download your app and pay in the app, if that's your entire business model, well, that's fine. But you're going to have to remember that you're competing against TikTok. So you better have $1 billion in marketing in addition to whatever you're spending in content. And you have to have fresh content every day, and not just a little fresh content, hours and hours and hours of fresh content every day, because that's what you're competing against on TikTok. However, if you think about vertical, premium, serialized content in the context of the creator economy, or the affinity economy, as I like to call it, then you can have an app, and that's part of your idea, but also brand integration and putting it on TikTok and on Instagram and figuring a way to make it work on Shorts and generate ad revenue there. If you can really create a fandom who A, wants to pay for your content in some cases, B, will suffer through ads in other cases, or D, you can integrate brands into your content and generate revenue that way, and E, I think I'm running out of order here, but lastly, you can figure out a merchandise line and a live entertainment line and truly create a flywheel around your content, the way that Alex Cooper does, the way that Mr. Beast does, the way that Emma Chamberlain does, the way that Darman does. That's a business model. And I think you can make really great content, but you have to understand, like, so many of the people you and I talk to who are producers or publishers do not understand the basic rules of the media economy as they stand today. And then they blindly charge towards microdramas as if it's a real thing without understanding exactly what's going on.
The failing of Quibi is still affecting all producers and operators and keep them back from scaling short content business. The point you outlined about advertising is important. I remember when I was making the strategy of advertising on streaming, it was like feeling like the caveman playing with the fire. Now advertising is everywhere, as we saw the partnership between Netflix and Fan, Amazon and France TV. Disney is buying content from other linear and traditional operators. So advertising is evolving the game. Streaming need performance, permanence of the audience, the famous average time spent. This is a currency important for advertising. There are bundles, partnership, now Netflix with Amazon DSP, and also Netflix reportedly wants to buy Warner Bros. What is going on to the advertising world matching the streaming world? So advertising seems overwhelming and used from these operators to pay the bill. But we have to remember that maybe advertising is not only a commodity; it has to be something that involves engage customers for everything. What do you think about this?
I mean, I think it's so much. I got into a debate with somebody on LinkedIn today. It's like, YouTube is the enemy, and they do this and they do that, and the algorithm decides this, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, that's great. Now do the BBC. That's awesome. Now do the traditional gatekeepers who have decided what's on television since time immemorial, and the fact that they all went to the same private school together. Like, how are those two things different? And so everybody likes to talk about, well, now advertising is all hot again, blah, blah, blah. But if you go back to the original, origination of content, let's put the public broadcasters aside for a second. I'll get back to them. But if you look at commercial content, it's always been funded by advertisers. It's never not been funded by advertisers. It was just done differently back then. This radio show brought to you by Texaco. It's the Texaco Star Theater. And then Jack Benny would come out and talk directly to camera about the sponsor of his show, or Milton Berle, or whoever it was, right? So I do think you're going to wind up going back to that original model. We are, in many cases. Roomies is a good example. It was paid for by a brand. And now it seems like Netflix and Anheuser-Busch are working together on programming around that content. And so I think it's really crucial to understand that people don't hate advertising. They hate bad advertising. People don't hate advertising. They hate too much advertising. People don't hate advertising. They hate ads for stuff that they don't need. I get ads for baby food. Like, why would I get ads for baby food? My kids are 30 and 27. So it's just not applicable to me. But if I saw a great ad for a Broadway show, Ragtime, coming back to Broadway. Not a show that I like, by the way, but it was a great ad. And I am a Broadway fan. I loved the ad. I loved seeing the ad. And at the end of the ad, I went, huh, that's a really good ad. And whenever I see a really good ad, I go, huh, that's a really good ad. The Super Bowl is a great example of that. Like, people tune in for the ads, not the game, unless it's the Philadelphia Eagles who destroyed the Kansas City Chiefs and are now Super Bowl champions. Go Birds. But the key element of this is good advertising in context of the right content for the right audience at the right time will always work. So think about it. Think about advertising that way. Now I want to go back to the public broadcasters for a second. Everything I said about the big tech players pulling back and everything we've talked about really creates an advantage for the public broadcasters, because the only platforms on earth, and I'm going to take the United States out of this equation, but the only platforms on the face of the earth who we know the revenue is either stable or growing over the next decade are public broadcasters. All the public broadcasters in Europe, unless there's a major overturn in politics, which could happen, but let's assume that things remain somewhat like they are today, their revenue, their income is stable. The only threat to these public broadcasters is their inability to cater to the next generation of audiences. To be blunt, like if the public broadcasters fail to accurately serve Generation A, Generation Z, and Millennial, actually, they don't put their news on YouTube while it's on television, and they don't have a rationale for not doing that. And as a consequence, the level of disinformation for consumers under the age of 40 in the UK and around the rest of Europe is a real existential issue for democracy on the planet Earth. And so the only challenge that these organizations have is their own fear of going where their audiences are consuming content. And then you look at the commercial arms of these same organizations, BBC, ITV, etc., ZDF. You look at the commercial arms, they're doing it. They're leaning into YouTube. They're leaning into these other platforms. And so BBC Studios is doing a wonderful job of, so Bluey is the #1 most streamed show on the planet Earth. It's also a massive hit on YouTube simultaneously. And Disney pays them a fortune for that show. So you can operate in both ecosystems, the one for millennials and younger and the one for Xers and older. And in fact, not only can you must operate in both ecosystems simultaneously if you want to serve 100% of the audience that you're trying to reach.
Listen, Evan, Affinity Economy, on November the 6th, he will be an incredible guest at Intersections. He will be in Milan, Italy's leading digital marketing event, where media professional, marketing executive, innovators, me, and digital C-level leaders come together. Will be honored in moderating your meeting with the community of executive here in Italy, the best of marketing session, and you will deliver in this speech you're presenting your famous concept about affinity economy, arguing practically that today's media audiences are no longer just the older passive viewers, but communities. So you have to actively find your audience by inspiring, by giving values. There's an evolution by the typical audience target, and I think maybe there's an evolution also for brands. Can you say something about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that crucially, the size of your audience no longer matters. The number of subscribers no longer matters. That's why Netflix stopped reporting their subscriber numbers. These are vanity metrics made for Wall Street. They have no bearing really on the health of your business, because the cost of a subscriber and the cost of a view has skyrocketed, and it's getting more competitive, not less. What's more important is growing a passionate community of fans, users, audience members who engage with your content on a regular basis. They just don't watch it. They don't just hit like, they comment, they share, they buy the t-shirt. So it's way better to have 1 million hyper engaged fans than it is to have 100 million kind of lazily present audience members. And BBC Studios is a great example of that. Love Island and ITV is a really good example of that. All Sports is a great example of that. And so the affinity economy is based on a whole new set of metrics that measures love, that measures passion, that measures fandom. And there will be people out there who say you can't measure love, you can't measure fandom. You absolutely can. If you're selling a whole bunch of t-shirts, if a huge percentage of your audience buys t-shirts, that is a great metric for fandom. If an enormous number of your viewers share the content with their friends and family while they're watching it or after they've watched it, that is a terrific KPI for fandom. So you have to reorient your business away from the vanity metrics invented by celebrity CEOs to please their shareholders and Wall Street or the investor class, and reorient back to the beginning where Steve Jobs started it and Walt Disney started it and Ted Turner started it, which is, what's the problem of a specific audience? What's the desire of a specific fan base? And let me hyper serve that fan base to the point where they will pay me or they will celebrate me to their friends and family. That is the affinity economy. And them's the new rules. And again, I am a perfect example of this. You and I, this is the first time we've actually kind of pseudo met, right? You love my stuff, right? You quote my stuff to other people, correct? You share my stuff with other people, right? And so I am a great example. And I don't have that big an audience, but I'm now making more money than I ever did working for corporate media. And I have no bosses. No one tells me what to do. I get to say whatever I want. And I have a community of people who really love what I do and tell me that all the time. That is the perfect example of how to do that for yourself, but it's also exactly where the media economy is going.
Evan, another question that I'm making to my guests. Advertising. I state that it is change, not only me, it is change. Advertising in creator economy needs to engage, inspire, and be good, as we said. Company create content, and to me, they have to become a sort of media company themselves. It is possible to apply affinity economy also to brands. Do brands need a chief content officer, someone who is orchestrating content, transforming content to better the engagement and sense overall?
It's a good question. I think, it's interesting. As somebody who has produced content my whole life, I typically don't wade into creative conversations because it's so subjective, right? And so I do think a chief creative officer rather than a CMO is important. But crucially, I think right now, more important than that, for both brands and agencies and publishers and producers, a chief community officer, the head of fan engagement, the person who isn't just marketing, but is taking care of the community, is listening to the community, is interpreting the community's needs and wants and desires back to the heads of the business and to the heads of content. Someone who listens to the voice of the audience and then advocates for the audience and its members on a regular basis. To me, that's the position that I don't see anyone having, except for, individual. Mr. Beast has a community manager, you know what I mean? So I don't see that person inside any organizations, to be blunt, right now. And I think that is a kind of perfect example of why traditional media is failing so hard.
This is a great point. I will write something on community officer and will tag you. So thanks, Evan. If these episodes help you guys navigate the complexity of media, share with your friend and spread the voice. If not, don't do it. And for Italian friends, don't miss Evan and me at Intersections in Milan on 5th and 6th November. Evan, thanks again for mapping the terrain with us. See us on LinkedIn and obviously at Intersections event in Milan.
Cool. Thank you so much.